Hey, Saster, let's talk about Zoom. I mean, look, we've all been talking a lot about Zoom since COVID. We are in Zoom all day long. We know it, we love it. We can find its quirks. We know our favorite features. We know the ones that maybe we wished worked a little bit differently. But we really run our companies on Zoom today, and that's fabulous. But in the last year, Zoom has gone from a stunning 1 billion in ARR just before COVID to 4 billion. It quadrupled. It went from 1 billion to 4 billion in 1 year. And that is unprecedented in SaaS, at least in public SaaS companies. We may find later that some others did the same. It looks like Discord, for example, which is a sort of a Slack for gamers and others, has grown just as quickly. There'll be a few others, but in our group of public companies, no one benefited as much as Zoom. Not even Slack, not even other applications that we needed to immediately work from home. But Zoom grew the most. So maybe superficially we can't learn much from Zoom because it's such an outlier. But it turns out if we step back and take a look, we can find 5 interesting things about Zoom that I think we can all learn from, and then we'll add 4 bonus points. So number one point, and one we've talked about so many times on our 5 interesting learning series, is actually that phone is super important to Zoom. Now, you know Zoom, it is the video service, but it turns out almost every SaaS company, as it approaches a billion in revenue, needs a second product to scale, right? At some point, there are only so many businesses on planet Earth. They can only buy so much from one product. So everyone ends up having a second product. Twilio has multiple products. We see so many other leaders adding them as they scale, and we've tracked this. And the ones that actually have slowed down after a billion are the ones that didn't. Dropbox slowed down because it really didn't expand much beyond its iconic product. Slack hasn't slowed down, but perhaps the reason it's become part of Salesforce is that it has one product. And Box may end up growing faster than Dropbox in the end because it has multiple products. And what we see with almost any vendor is if you have multiple products, you buy more from them. Folks that buy multiple products from Box have higher NRR and last longer. Folks that buy more from Procore, which is about to go public at 500 million in revenue. Folks that buy 3 or more products stay longer and buy more. We see this again and again. And so as great as Zoom is, it's added its second product, which is phone. And in 2 years, they've added 10,000 phone customers and 1 million paying seats. And Zoom Phone is a very elegant product to a problem that's been around a long time, how to run phone in the browser and otherwise. But they've added 1 million additional paying seats they would not have without a second product. So it's a reminder, it's not always easy. We had a long chat with both the co-founders of HubSpot on second product. HubSpot has expanded its footprint substantially into sales and others, and it's worked, but wasn't always a natural upsell process to all the customers. But Zoom seems to have hit it, at least with this segment of its product. So Zoom Phone is actually, it's a big deal. It is a big deal to the company, which is entering its material. Second interesting learning, it's really two, our second and third, which is Zoom has gone both more enterprise since COVID and less. Like, how can it do both? Well, let's break it down for a minute. It's enterprise business, which they define as 100K up in customers. So these are not mammoth customers, but they're large. They added 100,000 plus customers in the last 12 months, 1,000 new customers paying 100,000 or more a year. That's incredible. And that is 158% growth, stunning growth that for any other SaaS company would be off the charts and would drag them very enterprise. Like any other company that grew a segment 188%, well, that would be your primary segment. But interestingly, and this is point three, is even though enterprise exploded in Zoom during COVID, SMBs exploded even more. It's crazy. Their SMB customers quintupled, right? So overall, Zoom quadrupled last year. Its enterprise business grew 1.5x, or rather, I guess 2.5x, but its small businesses grew 470%. That's crazy. And so what happened was, even though they added 1,000 customers paying $100,000 or more a year, actually their revenue count skewed more SMB because they grew even faster. So before COVID, about 20% of Zoom customers had fewer than 10 employees. Now it's almost 40. Almost 40% of Zoom customers have 10 or fewer employees. So it's very interesting as you scale. Many of us that have been doing SaaS for a while find that our enterprise customers outgrow our SMBs because not just because the accounts are bigger, but because of the magic of NRR, right? If your enterprise customers grow organically 140% in NRR and your SMBs struggle to hit 100, over time, your enterprises will outgrow your existing SMB customers. So we haven't always seen it. We haven't seen that with Zendesk, we haven't seen it with Sonda. Now we haven't seen it with Zoom. Zoom has grown so electrically with SMBs that they have grown even faster than enterprises, which have also adopted them. Point four, NRR, which we just talked about, net recurring revenue. How much does Zoom keep? Zoom's 130%, which is pretty impressive for a company that is 40% tiny businesses, right? It's tough to even get 100% from tiny businesses. Shopify and HubSpot have about 100%. Zoom overall has 130, which is very impressive. But more interesting is that it's consistent. Zoom has had 130% net revenue retention for 11 quarters in a row. It had it when it was growing quickly. And then when it exploded from 1 to 4 billion in 1 year, it still had 130% NRR. So a lot of lessons to learn there. But first of all, you don't have to put up with low NRR from small businesses. Zoom proves otherwise. And maybe the most important meta thing is don't let yourself off the hook. Don't let yourself off the hook for NRR declining because accounts are fully penetrated. Don't let yourself off the hook for NRR going down because you're bigger. Zoom proves you can have that same 130% magical NRR all the way up to 4 billion in ARR. And most importantly, no matter how fast your growth is, you can still have that 130%. Okay, fifth point, and then we'll do a few bonus points. But the fifth interesting point, and we track this all because it ends up being important for so many SaaS founders, is Zoom actually was slow to go international. Some of us go very early because look, the web works everywhere, and you will often find even in your first year that you start getting customers outside of your home market if your product works well in a browser. Zoom was slow. And even just before COVID, only 20% of its revenue came out of North America. That's not much for a company at $1 billion in revenue of ARR. But in 1 year, it went to 33%, right? Zoom embraced it. And I'm not sure why it was relatively low for Zoom, but a lot of folks with the communications element, RingCentral was low, Zoom was low. It may simply be because of communication networks. But in any event, Zoom was slow to go international. Some of us are fast, but it has embraced it. And the meta learning is that with very, very, very few exceptions, your customers are everywhere on the web today. Your customers are in Europe, and they are in APAC, and they are in Australia, and they are in South America, and maybe there's even some in Africa and other environments, and they can be in India. And China's tough because they have their own internet. But if you see a pocket, like if you start to get 5, 8, 10% of your customers from a geo, especially from Europe, but sometimes from Asia, lean in because you did no marketing there. You didn't even try. You tried in your home market. And if you find early traction outside of your home market, don't run from it. Embrace it. Localize your app. Do more. Have a local team. Open even a small office as we open offices again. But be close to those customers, because if you get pulled into international early, it can be a gift. It can help you grow even faster than you otherwise would, because it means people everywhere want your product, even with no marketing there. It's a magical thing. Okay, 4 other quick notes on Zoom. Number 6, this one is super interesting. 50% of its customers pay monthly. 50%. It was 40% before COVID. Now it's 50, and that makes sense because they have so many more very small businesses, right? With almost 40% of their small businesses, 40% of their customers, 1 to 10 employees, they don't want to pay 3-year contracts. It makes sense they'll want to pay monthly. But the meta point is half of Zoom pays monthly. So just challenge yourself. Do you need annual contracts? Look, there's different ways to approach this. We did a deep dive on Qualtrics, which is worth almost 30 billion. It had an epic IPO. 100% of its customers are on annual contracts. That's one example. But Zoom wants to take friction out of everything, and so they've taken the position that for the most part, except in their very large contracts, pay how you want. You want to pay monthly, pay monthly. You want a discount to pay annually, pay annually. You want a further discount for a multi-year deal, great. And that's not all of us. Some of us have much more complicated deployments, need more services, et cetera. But think about that. If Zoom can afford to have half its customers pay monthly, are you sure you want to take that option away from your customers just to make your numbers look better? And it also reminds us, Zoom has 130% NRR with monthly customers. Think about that for a minute, because your NRR and your renewal rates, especially your renewal rates, can be flattered by longer term contracts because the churn can take a while. Get folks to sign a 3-year contract, mathematically, your churn's not going to show up for 37 months. Zoom is doing it the hard way. They have 130% NRR from small businesses, and they let them sign monthly contracts. It can be done, folks. Be more customer centric, and ultimately you will have more customers. Zoom sort of proves it. 7, just a quick note. Zoom's at 4 billion in revenue. It's generating 2 billion in free cash. Half of that 4 billion is flowing to the bottom line. And Zoom has almost always been almost break even since the early days. In fact, Eric Yuan, going up to the IBM, made it a rule to just break even for 2 years straight. Just break even, to spend what's left in marketing. And that's why you saw airport ads and buses wrapped in Zoom, because they were doing so well. They had almost an extra marketing budget, but Eric made sure they didn't lose anything. But now they're generating a stunning 2 billion a year. Half of their ARR is coming out as free cash flow. So we can't all do that, but it's good to remind us that software does not have to hemorrhage cash forever. That software ultimately should be profitable, even with a sales team. Zoom does have a sales team. It doesn't need it for a lot of their small accounts. Even with marketing, even with billboards and buses, Zoom is generating 50% of its revenue in free cash flow. We can't all do 50. But at some point, software should scale because everyone can use the same code base. Point 8, and this is super interesting. Zoom quadrupled during COVID from 1 billion to 4 billion again in 1 year. Incredible. But the gains were not even. This is super interesting. Zoom won more than the others. WebEx grew. Even Citrix GoToMeeting, which we think of as I don't even see it much in the wild anymore. It grew. RingCentral has a competitive product. RingCentral and Zoom used to be partners. Now they're more competitors between phone and screen sharing. RingCentral grew. 8x8 grew. Some others, even Skype grew, but Zoom grew more. Zoom grew much faster on both a relative and absolute basis than its competitors did. So it's interesting. The COVID benefits were not evenly distributed. And interestingly, Slack grew very nicely during COVID. But again, Discord, which is sort of more the consumer version of Slack, it quadrupled. And Slack grew nicely, but it did not quadruple the way Zoom did. So the COVID benefits are not evenly distributed. And I don't know why for sure Zoom grew more than the others, but it's a reminder that brands matter. It's a reminder that we don't have time. Most of us don't have time to test Uber Conference and Skype and RingCentral and bake off 11 vendors. Most of us just trust brands. Very few of us even have time to do a bake off between 2 vendors. So brands matter, and brands matter even more than ever as you scale because they're proxies for trust. And Zoom benefited far more than its competitor set from COVID. And the last point 9, and this is interesting for us for the future. Zoom is predicting 42% growth next year, or the coming year after COVID. And 42% at 4 billion in ARR is still basically unprecedented. Okay, almost no one grows 42% at 4 billion in ARR. So Zoom is an epic company, a generational company. But it is interesting that they're predicting 42% after a year in which they grew 400%. So what is Zoom saying? Zoom is saying the COVID boost is real. We're going to come out of this, and we're still going to grow like a rocket ship. Adding 42% on top of 4 billion in ARR, let that sink in a minute. That means Zoom's still saying, look, we're going to add $1.6 billion in new bookings in the next 12 months. I mean, God, they're adding 1.6 billion of new ARR in the next 12 months. It's really jaw dropping, especially since it's organic, right? So many folks like Salesforce have grown inorganically. But it's also saying that the massive boost is, of course, behind us, as we know, right? So Zoom is saying growth will be huge next year, but at 42%, it's coming back to normalcy. We're coming back to normal types of growth rates for SaaS and enterprise software, which is what you expect. And 42% is crazy, but it's not the 400%, or sometimes you can get the math confused, 300 or 400%. It's not the quadrupling of last year. It's growing an epic, but normalish 42% next year. Incredible. Anyhow, Zoom is someone to learn from. And sometimes we think it's too big, but actually break this down. Go monthly. Follow your customers internationally where they are. Let your customers buy how they want to. Zoom's a reminder we can go both enterprise and small business at the same time, right? And Zoom's a reminder that the winners in a market sometimes benefit even more than the rest of the pack. So be one of them. Leverage your brand, leverage your customer happiness, get that incredible 130% net revenue retention that Zoom has from small businesses over 11 quarters in a row. Be the product folks love, lean into that, and maybe you'll see some of the same magic as Zoom.